PowerPoint presentation, we'll talk about counterargument, responding to the opposite point of view in a persuasive essay. So counterargument is when we think about a persuasive position, what the opposite side of our position has to say. We try to think about thinking about their position from a reasonable perspective and how we can respond to that as we're talking about it in our essay. So it doesn't actually weaken our own argument, but it makes it stronger. It makes it seem like we've done our research, we understand that it's a complex topic, that there's more positions than just ours, and it makes us also seem really reasonable and fair. Both of those things tend to make us more persuasive. So when we present counterargument in an essay, we want to be fair. We don't want to use connotative language that's going to make it seem like we're insulting or being unfair to their position. So saying something like, a bunch of stupid people think that, it's not going to win us a lot of credibility or a lot of points in our persuasive. So we want to be fair, we want to be thorough, we want to put ourselves in their position, try and really understand what their perspective is. When we refute it, that's how we respond to it. So we never just want to put counterarguments, stick it into an essay. We always want to respond to it or refute it. And that's the way where we kind of say, well, this is why we don't think that that's right, or this is why we don't think that that's fair, or this is why we don't think that's strong. There's a couple of different ways we can refute it. That's what this PowerPoint is going to focus on. So we could show that it's based on faulty assumptions. We could show that the facts are wrong. We could show the analysis is wrong. The values that it's based on aren't acceptable. Or we can try and flip it around to actually support our own argument. So this is something we definitely want to do in your essay. You will be required to include at least one piece of counterargument in your own essay. So what we're going to do for the next couple 8 slides is think about one claim. This is our claim. Recreational use of marijuana should be legalized. I'm not endorsing it or thinking anything like that, but I'm going to use it as an example as we think about counterargument. So if this is our claim, this is the topic of our essay. Recreational use of marijuana should be legalized. I'm going to give you some pieces of counterargument that someone might say, and we're going to think about how we would respond to them. Okay, so one piece of counterargument someone might say would be, marijuana is a dangerous drug that harms users' minds and bodies. So one way we could respond to that counterargument is to point out some faulty factual assumptions, problems with the facts or the data. One way we might do that is to say, actually, marijuana is used as a medicine in many situations, so it can't be that dangerous. That would be one example. Maybe another example would be to pull up numbers of deaths from marijuana or something like that. A lot of websites or a lot of sources show that number to be pretty low. So that would be a way we could kind of point out the factual problems of that. Another piece of counterargument someone might say would be, marijuana turns users into potheads who are unmotivated, unproductive members of society. As opposed to just pointing out problems with facts, we can also point out problems with the analysis, the interpretation of those facts. So number one, we could talk about the idea of turns users into potheads. Certainly not every marijuana user is going to be a pothead. We could respond to it that way. We could also focus on the second part, unmotivated, unproductive members of society. I think a smart way to respond to that maybe would be to point out someone who's a known marijuana user, point to the fact that maybe they are motivated or are productive members of society. We could point to the problems with the assumptions that way. So again, the same claim. We would include that counterargument, how we're responding to it, is what we're talking about here. Another way we could respond to counterargument would be to point out that it's based on faulty values, not consistent with the majority of society. So a counterargument that says, the government knows best how to keep its citizens happy and healthy. We could say, well, actually a lot of people don't think that the government knows best how to keep its citizens happy or healthy. Or we could say, actually our government is a democracy, so the citizens ultimately know best how to keep themselves happy and healthy, etc. Sort of a weak example, but that's another way we could respond to counterargument. The last way, or even the best way, to respond to counterargument would be to flip it around and actually make your argument stronger. To agree with them and actually use that to back up what you have to say. So a counterargument might be, Many people die from using tobacco and alcohol, so marijuana would not be any different. When I look at something like that, I could actually say, yeah, it's true, many people do die from using tobacco and alcohol, and they're entirely, well, not entirely, but they're regulated and legal drugs in this country, right? So that's not necessarily a deterrent. Does that make sense? So I actually used that same example to flip that around and support what I have to say. So again, that's not an endorsement or anything like that, just an example so we can think of some different counterarguments. So when you're picking a counterargument, pick one that's actually persuasive. Nothing's going to be gained from rebutting something that nobody believes or that it's a wild card. So pick ones that seem reasonable or ones that seem popular, ones that a lot of people have to say, or ones that seem to make a lot of sense. If you can respond to those, if you can refute those, it means your essay is pretty strong. Counterargument can go in a couple of different places in an essay. I think probably a lot of high school teachers teach it this way, to have your point number 1, your point number 2, your point number 3, and then add an extra paragraph where you deal with some counter-argument, refutation, responses. That would be the paragraph before the conclusion. So you put it all in one place, in other words, all in one paragraph, usually towards the end. Another way you can think about it would be to put it actually in the middle of the essay. So maybe you would want to actually put the counterargument refutation in your same paragraph that's talking about point number 1, a counterargument in the same paragraph point number 2, a counterargument in the same paragraph point number 3, point number 4, etc. So that might be in one paragraph, it might be in all your paragraphs. You might structure each paragraph that way. You might just do it in one. I think that works really well if the counterargument you want to use matches up really clearly with one of your points. It goes one for one. So either of those structures, putting it in one paragraph towards the end, putting it throughout the essay would be just fine for this assignment and can be really effective as you write your essay. One kind of last thought we want to have as we're thinking about using counterargument in an essay is you have to use really clear transition signals to let your readers know that you're actually doing counterargument. You want to think about if you're talking about your argument and then suddenly you say something about the opposite, it can be really confusing for the reader if you don't explain to them what you're doing. So you're going to want to use some transition language to show that you're talking about counterargument. Some examples of that might be something like, many people think that, or many people feel that. It is often thought that it would be easy to say that. It might seem as though this is true. Those are all really good ways they're showing the reader, yep, I'm flipping, talking about the opposite of my opinion, but it's not my opinion, and I'm trying to give you the counterargument. Just like we have to introduce our counterargument really clearly, we also need to introduce our refutation or our response. We're flipping back now to our own argument, so it's going to seem really inconsistent if we're including our argument, counterargument, and then refutation without those clear signals. So you got to use some clear transition language for that. Some ways we could do that, what this argument overlooks is, this view seems sound, but while this position is popular, it is not. Although the core of the claim is valid, it suffers from a flaw in whatever. So those are all really good ways to kind of help you show how you're responding to it, how you're thinking about it. Take a lot of care as you're introducing your counterargument and refutation to pick the right words, right signals to let the reader know what you're doing. So in conclusion, counterargument is a really effective way to make our own arguments seem stronger, seem sounder, to make us seem reasonable, credible, smart, like we've done our research. You are required for essay number 3 to include at least one piece of counterargument in your essay, whether you put it in its own paragraph or throughout the paper. So make sure that you're thinking about that, using the right signals to do it.